Japanese culture is being changed as we speak. But I think culture is one of these things that's very hard to talk about. Because first of all, we don't know how to define it, as in different people have different definitions. For example, Japan has many people, maybe 100 million. So if a person is born in Japan to Japanese parents, whatever that means, say family has been there for hundreds of years, and they don't do the things other Japanese people do, does that mean that person is not Japanese? I would say no, right? But on the other hand, we evaluate whether someone is really Japanese or not by their actions. So how does it work? What determines culture? And I think we generally have a sense of what culture is. One of those things we sort of have a sense of grasp, even though we don't know how to define it. And I want to say that, people say Japanese culture is honest. Japanese people are hardworking, this or that, right? But in Delta, not everybody's the same. But they're still Japanese. So this most recent time in Japan, I was talking to my cousin who's lived there for years, and, I say Japanese are this, and he's like, well, some people are not, right? And that's just absolutely true. So what can you make in terms of conclusions about Japanese people or culture? In the past, everybody says they're honest. Everybody has a story of their first time in Japan, losing a wallet on a train or a phone and having it returned with all the money in there, their phone unscratched. Amazing, right? This time I think I left some stuff in a hotel and it wasn't reported to be found. The medicine is not just some vitamins and the charger were, but the bag with the wallet and money and credit cards was not. And my guess would be to say that somebody took it. And I would venture to say maybe not a Japanese person, but a foreigner. There's a lot of people working in Japan who aren't Japanese. And that's hard to say, right? People may say that's racist, blah, blah, blah. But I think, it's true that many other cultures are not as honest as the Japanese. I would say venture maybe all cultures are not as honest, right? There's stories of Japanese people who starved to death. Older generation, they don't want to burden their children. They starve to death at home alone. I would say maybe that's their culture. If you look in Japan, there's very few mass murders. Many times people are upset, they commit suicide, they just jump in front of a train. That's why you have suicide barriers. They're not there to prevent people from getting pushed, they're there to prevent people from jumping. They play cheery music to try to help. All these things are quintessentially Japanese. But there's been an influx of people from other countries. What does that mean? I think it means your culture changes. When you change and you have a mixture of people rub off on each other. You could say one culture is stronger than the other. Like my friend when we were in China saying, like, my Chinese is, I would say, lazier Chinese. I speak more Taiwanese Chinese, Mandarin, and we don't pronounce everything that Beijingers do. And it rubs off on him. It's easier to be influenced by a lazier mode of speaking, like American English versus British English, when it pronounces H's. And in America, blah, 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 right? We don't enunciate as much. Many letters are silent. That in England, they wouldn't be like herb, we say herb. Easier. Lazier is easier. But if you have enough people, then I think anybody would be influenced, right? You lose your accent when you move to a place where they speak differently. It may come back with a vengeance when you're emotional, nostalgic, etc., speaking to somebody at home. But you can't help be influenced by other people, and there's many other people there in Japan. Japanese people follow rules, but I don't think they're blind. When you see a lot of people jaywalking, what do they start to think? When you see a lot of people disobeying the rules and getting ahead, what do they start to think? Right? They're not immune to influences. I think many times also people come from other countries, they still are inherently this or that, right? I would say that you could make an argument maybe for a lot of Japanese people, honesty is at their core. They'd rather die than be dishonest. But I think for many people it's not their core. No matter how much of a veneer, how much they fit in, at the end of the day when nobody's watching, what do they do, right? And And I feel like that's the thing about culture, it's ever changing. Japanese culture would have changed by itself anyways, because there's many older Japanese people and not as many young Japanese people. They need support. Robots would have come in. They would interact with robots differently. Their culture would have changed regardless. But culture is changing. Statements that we made about Japanese may not be true anymore. They may not have been true 100%. Maybe they're true 99%. That Japanese people return stuff. But now in Japan, my wife said people reported losing stuff in a hotel. She was still living there. And I could believe that. Right? Maybe Japanese people won't believe that. But the world is changing. Japan is changing. Whether they like it or not. And how does it influence you when you think things are the same, but they're not? How do you update your way of thinking? Right? It's really, really hard. And there's also a younger, older generation divide. Older people are used to a certain way. Older people don't know how to use a lot of new technology. Younger people do. They don't understand how old people don't get it. What is culture? Culture is not just what you think, but is influenced by what other people think. What you think other people think, right? In Japan, you may think everybody's going to wait. And when people don't, then you're left behind. How do you feel when you're left behind? Does that affect you? How much external influence, pressure can you withstand before bowing down and saying, I need to change too? Is culture always the same? I would say no. But what is culture? How does it change? Why does it change? What do we really believe about other people when everybody is an individual that makes their own decisions individually, even in Japan?